Hi, this is Janossy. I'm going to spend this video paging through the workbook assigned for reading, that is chapters 1 and 2, just so that you can understand how we're going to be using the workbook and what content in chapters 1 and 2 is really important for the course. So to do this, I'm using a tool that lets me mark up the PDF document. First of all, let me see how well this scrolls. These are the texts assigned in the book. Only this text is assigned for this course. The second book you see here formerly was assigned, but I've extracted a bunch of readings related to it and found other sources for the same coverage. Taking a look at the table of contents, we're going to be talking about these two chapters in this first unit of the course. In chapter 1, you'll want to read through this introduction. In fact, you'll want to do that in all cases. The study questions that you find in each chapter of the workbook will help you, in most cases, focus on what's important. In this first chapter, however, this material that currently is present here about the electromagnetic spectrum and how light affects your vision is something that we're going to defer till Unit 3 or 4, and I'll be rearranging this workbook in the next edition of it. So the material that you see here, dealing with the electromagnetic spectrum and images, is something that we're going to defer till the later point in the course. Now, the exercise that you see here, called Assignment 1, we're not actually going to be doing in this course. This involves using an adding machine tape to make a timeline over a 30,000 year period. The point of it, and the point of you looking up the dates of these different events and putting them on that timeline, was simply to show the vast expanse of time since the first of these cave paintings that we understand ancients had created about 15,000 BC to the present time. So most of the early part of this timeline would have been empty, and only in the last couple of feet of it, it was 25 feet long, so it really was quite extensive. Only the last 2 feet of it or so would really have most of the events that we're taking a look at in this course. But we won't be doing this because it's a little tough to send an adding machine tape through the internet. Now, chapter 2 in the workbook. This reading is really pretty important. What happens here is it provides coverage of an aspect of ancient thinking dealing with the way the world was arranged in terms of perfect solids. Some of the ancients, especially the Greeks, had a society that was organized in a productive enough way that some people could actually exist by thinking rather than having to work for or grow the food that they eat. The Greek civilization was productive enough that people such as this could be maintained simply in that role. And people in that role thought a lot about the way the world was made up, and they theorized about how things might exist. So the reading that exists here, we're only going to be going through chapter 3 in this first unit of the course. But in that unit, and in some of the ancillary reading, you're going to come across some of the topics discussed in these study questions at the beginning of the workbook. And in particular, what you're going to want to read of this end of the workbook is, starting here on page 13, this information about geometry, which leads into a discussion about things like mathematical discoveries like pi, and some definitions that you'll see on page 15, leading up to the definition of some geometric shapes. And these definitions are important for you to understand the role played by what are known as the perfect solids. So we start that discussion in the workbook on page 18. And here you see one of these perfect solids, a sphere. On the next page you see another one of these called an octahedron, and a lot of supporting information as to why this is one of the perfect solids. Here we have an icosahedron, and dodecahedron, And there's another shape in here too, a cube, which I didn't show in the slides, but which definitely exists as one of the 5 perfect solids. All this has to do with the ancients thinking about how God or gods communicated to people special things. And the idea that if you reflected back to the god or gods, that you understood this, you might be in a better position with that deity than if you didn't understand this. So almost as if it were a riddle. And because only 5 solids existed that met the characteristics of the perfect solids, ancients thought that there was something special about the number 5 and about those particular solids. Another thing that the ancients came up with is the golden mean and the golden rectangle. And that comprises the last of the discussion in this chapter 2 of the workbook. Now we will be doing some work with the golden mean and the golden rectangle. So make sure you understand this, although that work won't come up until Unit 2 in the course. So at this point, you have an assignment that will be listed under Part D of Unit 1, and there'll be a bit of a choice there. It may be the work that's outlined here in Chapter 2 in the workbook. This assignment on the perfect solids is kind of fun. Here are the perfect solids, and what you wind up doing with them is actually making them up. That is, there are 5 sets of materials here where you actually take these pages out of the workbook, and by cutting these out and folding them up, you make those perfect solids. This is the work that you may wind up doing in Unit 1 in the course. So this is one reason why it's essential for you to have the workbook. The work that comes from it, you can't access normally in any other way than having that book, because I created that workbook specifically for this course. However, since some of you may be delayed in getting that workbook, Amazon I think had to reorder copies from the publisher, I did put the first 2 chapters of the workbook in PDF form out on the Blackboard website, and you could get to these without having to have the workbook in hand. However, for Units 2 and beyond, the publisher doesn't let me distribute the entire workbook this way. So for Units 2 and beyond, you really will have to have the workbook in hand, and if you haven't ordered it or purchased it yet, you'll want to do that. That wraps up what I'm going to tell you from the workbook of Chapters 1 and 2, and you see here we have Chapter 3, which we'll start considering in Unit 2 of the course. Hope this is helpful to you. Bye-bye.